Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Astrodogs, a canine-themed rail shooter. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Dynamic Media Triad and publisher Digital Tribe Games, Astrodogs released to the Nintendo Switch and the PC via Steam in April of 2022. So this title is definitely one that pays homage to popular titles in the rail shooter genre, such as Star Fox and kind of Panzer Dragoon. So if those are titles that you've enjoyed, then this is one that I would recommend you have a look at. There is a demo available on the PC version, so it's a great way to try out the game. My feelings on it are a little mixed. I love rail shooters, so I was really looking forward to trying this title out, but it does have a few issues that prevent me from fully recommending it. But if you do enjoy the genre, this is one that's worth a look, especially at the price point, as I do feel it's pretty reasonable. So diving into the menu itself, this is one area where we kind of encounter my first issue. I personally feel that the menu is clunky, to say the least. The way that you kind of maneuver through it just doesn't feel intuitive. There are some areas where in order to back out, instead of a button press, you'd have to go to the back, and sometimes maneuvering to that back button can be a pain in the butt, or you can't do it from all the menus, just issues like that. So what do we have here? So the adventure menu is where we're going to start the game from, but real quick we'll just go through the other elements of the menu. So there's the garage. Here you can change the look of your ship. There are several unlockable skins, but as far as I can tell, it's only cosmetic. It doesn't actually change the way that your ship functions. And this is what I'd like to say. Well, even though we're here, if we press the confirm button, it actually, we start highlighted over the adventure. Entering the garage, we can see this is our ship that we will be showing off, the Red Paw, but I've also been able to unlock the Pizza Paw. And there's several other ships that we can unlock, but it's actually pretty difficult to do so. Confirming back on the Red Paw, we also have scores. There are 10 stages in the game, and you're setting the best rank possible. This is done very much in a Star Fox style, where you gain points for the enemies you destroy. Some enemies are worth 1, 3, 10, 15. It's a very familiar system. In addition to that, we also have this mission council screen. It just basically gives you a little bit of a story blurb that's kind of like helps set some personality of the force we belong to, which in this case isn't Star Fox, but is Astrodogs. Definitely a bit interesting there. So there are a couple ways we can play through the game. If you select play, you'll start the next stage in the sequence of gameplay. However, I have had some issue with this when going back and replaying some other stages. Say I'm trying to set a better score in stage 2. When I've gone to press play, it doesn't take me to the next stage that I've unlocked, but rather it would take me to stage 3, and I can't select stage 4. So just some weird issues like that. But we'll use level select to select a particular stage, and we're going to start with the first stage in the game, Hunger City. So launching, we have this little bit of a story cutscene before we actually dive into the gameplay itself. This game is very story-centric. You have all these really cutely drawn dogs, and the story is that we're this mercenary type force, Astrodogs, that's going up against this evil corporation, Wolfer, that's taken over the galaxy. Gameplay wise, this is very much a rail shooter where we have basically this forward screen that we're like locked into. We can move our ship around like that, and the ship itself does have some abilities, but in some ways I actually kind of feel like it might be just a little bit much. So we have our main shot, which fortunately is a rapid fire shot, and there's a little bit of auto lock on with the enemy itself. or rather to the enemies, let's see, itself. In addition to that, you might have noticed I'm already doing rolls, barrel rolls basically, and that will deflect enemy shots back at the enemy itself. But that only works with shots, not missiles. That's something to keep in mind. But in addition to that, as we defeat the enemies, you might have noticed I'm collecting green crystals. Those crystals help power our sub-weapons, which are listed in the bottom right. And fortunately, they also have the buttons listed to them. There's quite a bit there. So we have this bomb, which will travel forward and destroy the enemies in the area it hits. Really great at taking out small mobs. There's this lock-on missile where we can lock on to the enemies, release it to fire, so basically a multi-lock, and it deals quite a bit of damage. It's good for high HP enemies. There's also this beam that we can use, which will travel around the screen. It also deals quite a bit of damage, but it does eat through our energy rather rapidly. And last but not least, in situations where we're close to the enemies or skimming the ground, we also have this like shock, which will deal damage to enemies that we're rather close to. So very situational, but it has its uses for sure. In addition to that, if we hold down our roll button, we'll use the instinct, is what the game calls it, that we've been building up. You build up that meter basically in the top right of the screen. We've got 3 meters there. So the one with the heart is obviously our health. Below that is our instinct meter. That's what we hold to bring up this basically bullet time. And in that, we're still firing at our normal speed, but the enemies are reduced to a crawl, thus allowing us to take out the enemies safely. And this is has a couple of advantages. A, it allows us to deal quite a bit of damage in a very short period of time, which is actually very important against the bosses. It allows us to avoid potentially like dangerous situations, and help rack up as high a score as possible by destroying as many enemies as possible. So we've made it to the end of Hunger City, and here we're going to encounter our first boss fight after this elevator section here. So the game itself does do an excellent job of conforming to the usual. And just one like a little thing here. So just it might be the color of this boss, but I definitely had shades of Beautiful Joe with the color scheme of this particular boss fight. So this boss fight is a little bit simpler than most that come throughout the course of the gameplay. We have all these various attacks and parts of this enemy mothership that we have to destroy. So there's the propellers on either wing, there's the top hatch, and then there's the main core itself. This boss is straightforward, however the bosses that come after it I feel are not. Things start to ramp up a little bit in complexity from the second stage on, and it just ramps up from there. So here we're going to use our instinct to lock on with our missiles, and the missile lock-on didn't actually work, so never mind there. We've almost got this boss defeated, and we'll be able to move on to the next stage. So even in a situation where we've destroyed some of the sections of the ship itself, it still does go through the attack motions that it would have even if the section hadn't been destroyed, so something to keep in mind. First boss down, and here's another area that I have a little bit of a beef with the game. So when you complete a stage, you're given a rank, and it's not very clear what's going into this rank. It would really be helpful if the game itself said outright what you needed to achieve hit-wise or damage-wise or even time-wise to get an A rank or even an S rank, as those are what's required to unlock the additional ships that are in the garage. So for the Pizza Paw, the one I've unlocked, you need to get a rank A in Stage 1 and Stage 2, and that took me a fair bit of time. So you'll note here that the alerts change from what the initial beginning of the game said. So at this point, I've been set from, instead of starting on stage 5, I've been set back to starting on stage 2, which is definitely not good design. Just the way that things are, it should memorize my place at starting on stage 5, and like the level select should have been inconsequential to my next stage. But that said, we do want to go to stage 2 next to kind of like wrap things up as far as like thoughts are concerned. So stage 2 does have some interesting presentation here. We're basically flying through this like satellite field, as it were, and some of these discs we can destroy, others we cannot, and they also fire these like rather massive streams of shots at us, so you need to be careful as they'll quickly eat through your life. And that's one thing as well. If you're not careful, it's actually very easy to lose a lot of life fast and end up losing lives and having to restart the stage. If you get to the boss, you just restart at the boss. However, if you're anywhere else in the stage, you'll be starting from the beginning of the stage. Something to keep in mind. And that's basically Astrodogs served up for your enjoyment. So the game itself is, for the most part, a pretty enjoyable affair. But where it gets frustrating for me is just in the way that sometimes things are clunky. And you can see here, depending on how we're moving around the stage, it kind of feels like the camera gets locked behind us in a rather weird way. And in a rail shooter, like, just don't feel that serves us as well as it would in some other games. The button binding as well is something I do take issue with, and that'll bring me to my minus flavors. So the game itself doesn't really have an option menu. The only options I mentioned are, if you hit pause, you can invert your y-axis, as well as enable gyroscopic aiming. I'm assuming that's something that's specifically unique to the Switch, but depending on your controller on the PC, that could also be the case. But here, like, you can unpause out, but to press the buttons to get out of that menu, you actually have to select the continue. So I would have really appreciated the ability to rebind some of the buttons, especially given all the attacks we have, but that's just not what allowed, and, well, it kind of ruins my enjoyment of the game. So part of that is the roll itself is on the same button as your bullet time, and I would have liked to have separated those just to make things a little more distinct. As is, there's times when I'm accidentally holding down the button, I go into bullet time when I don't want to, thus wasting it, as well as potentially confusing my gameplay. Then there's also that problem that I was mentioning with sometimes the controls just feeling a little bit off, or the I think some of that might have actually just been the gyroscopic aiming, because I did have that turned on at some point. But also just the way that the camera gets lost behind you in some areas where it's not helping you tell where you are in relation to the enemies. Then that issue where we don't have any clear definition of how to obtain better ranks in the stages is frustrating. So with those aside, there are a couple plus flavors that I feel this game does have. And the biggest one there is I do really like the homage that the game has. It's definitely playing very, very strongly off of a Star Fox influence, and it's enjoyable for that particular influence. The game itself also has a really fun, cute, cartoony look to it. In my mind, it's very reminiscent of something like, say, Ratchet and Clank, or other games of maybe like PS2 or PS3 era. So if you like that kind of aesthetic as well, then this is definitely one that might be your alley. it also has a reasonable price point for the game itself. Though short at just 10 stages, I still feel like what they're asking for is reasonable for what they're delivering. So there you have it. That's Astrodogs Server for Your Enjoyment. Not one that I can wholeheartedly recommend, as it does feel like the game has issues, but for somebody that's really craving a decent rail shooter fix, this might be one that would just scratch that itch. Well, alright, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining me this week. I really hope you have a wonderful week yourself, and we'll see you next time.